Rockfin.
I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Hello, guys. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Sabby's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. My special guest tonight is Colin. He's a part of the Indie News Network. Colin is joining me for the first story tonight. What's going on, Colin? Thanks so much for squeezing me in.
Oh, you squeezed me in, but appreciate you having me once again.
Awesome. So what are we talking about tonight? So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Colin will be here for the first story because he experienced this firsthand. So I felt like it was best only to have Colin talk about this. So tonight I'm talking about Richard Wolff and Krystal Ball political shift. That was an interesting discussion on Richard Wolff's economic update. So that'll be an interesting story. We're also going to discuss Jamaal Bowman's slip up. Oops. What did Jamaal Bowman say at his recent appearance? And I'm also going to discuss Amazon CEO lies. Surprise, surprise. What did he say there and why is it problematic? So I do want to go ahead and get started with that Jamaal Bowman story. While I get this up, can you explain to everyone, Colin, like why was Jamaal Bowman there and what was this event about?
So most people do not know this, but in addition to my teaching, so I'm a teacher in DC, I'm also a family education advocate. So I am a volunteer for an education advocate nonprofit in DC as well. So 2 weeks ago, we had our annual year end of the year benefit, and Congressman Bowman was scheduled to speak at this event. So I had the opportunity to, obviously meet him very briefly, obviously listen to his speech, which I recorded because I figured that could be content for INN News, and it was. And yeah, so I think just in light of everything that's been happening, I figured, he was going to say something that we could probably talk about. And sure enough, he did.
He did. And I have that video here. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm laughing because I've seen this already, but it's really interesting. So here is Jamaal Bowman's speech at the event that Colin attended. So Colin did record this. And let's go ahead and get right into it.
Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that warm introduction. Congratulations to all the honorees. Where are the honorees? Raise your hand if you're an honoree. Please give them a round of applause. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your love of the work. Because you cannot be an honoree unless have love, true, deep, real love for the work that you are doing, for the kids that you are serving, for the families that you are serving, and for the communities you are serving. When teachers talk about love, and when activists in education talk about love, it's not a cliche for us. When people ask us why we're doing this, how is the work going, and they ask questions like that, the core answer is love. When I worked in education for 20 years, I was a teacher, I was a school counselor, I was a middle school principal. I did it for 20 years. I went to work every day. When you're sick, you push through, you do what you got to do, and you do it because you love the work that you do. But you also realize how important that work is to not just transforming the lives of the kids and families that you serve, but transforming the nation into what it is meant to be.
So I'm going to pause there for a second, because so far he's not saying anything that's concerning, right, Colin?
So far, no. And actually, to be, and I'm sure that there are parts that I know you're probably going to talk about. Overall, I didn't have a problem with the speech overall. But there were some certain things in the speech that I was like, especially given this was a room full of educators, many of them were of color. He could have gone into stuff a little more in depth than he chose to. And I think he had some reasons as to why he didn't, but we can talk about that later on.
Right.
And what it claims it wants to be, that work, that real work lives in our schools each and every day and lives in our classrooms as a sacred space. So I would not be here in Congress if it wasn't for my time as a teacher. I would not be here in Congress if it wasn't for my time as a school counselor. I don't even know if you know I was a school counselor. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my time as a middle school principal, because when you are in those spaces, all of the issues of society intersect at your doorstep every day, intersect in your classroom every day. When a child is struggling to learn a particular topic or content or reading or whatever it is, you know that that is connected to something in their family, community, society, etc. It's also connected to historical discrimination. And we have to be honest and tell that real story. There's a reason why we have an achievement gap that's rooted more in economics than it is in race. We got to talk about the economic issues there and the strategic political decision making that's led to certain communities remaining in poverty while others have not. And we have to talk about how poverty creates complex traumas that lead to some of the learning challenges that our kids face. And unfortunately, not enough educators even know about this. Come on.
So when we talk about the school to prison pipeline and not implementing restorative justice, is because we quick to put black and brown kids into special ed before really trying to find out what's going on. So all of that experience, all of that knowledge, if you will, led me to open a school, led me to pursue a doctorate, and led me to run for Congress against a 31-year institution, and I won. I didn't win because of me. I won because of the coalition we had, but because of my training as an educator. So, and an education activist, by the way. So it wasn't about just doing the work in classrooms and in schools. It was about being an activist in the community on the ground. And that's what you all are. So I need for you to continue to be activists, because in order to save our democracy, we need educators at the front of the line.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there for a second. Colin, I want to talk about the comment he just made about we need the activists on the ground, because this is what we've been saying over at RBN multiple times. Here you have someone who's in Congress. They are a member of the squad. They're progressive. And even he is telling you, you have to have the activists on the ground.
Yeah, which aligns with what AOC said to Afeni last year. You have to be the ones to do the work. So basically what he's saying here is absolutely true. Like, we can't just expect politicians just to go into Congress and think that they're going to do the work without us pushing them to do it. Like, and the only way that's going to happen is through direct action. So here he's right. The question is, how has he and others received us in terms of the mobilization and organization that we've been doing on the ground? That's the question.
Yep.
We need educated activists at the front of the line speaking truth to power. We need you at the local level, at the state level. Sorry, I know DC don't have a state. My bad. We worked on it. I'm an original co-sponsor. We're trying to get it done. But again, isn't that crazy? Like, what? That's crazy. But also, if you don't have consistent engagement and relationships with your member of Congress and the senators, you have to consistently engage them. Because yes, fight locally, but please, you gotta engage Congress. Because Congress has a lot of power to do a lot of things. And in order for, we need, I'll say it this way, I was sworn into office January 3rd. January 6th, there was an insurrection. It was an attack on our nation's capital, the first attack on the capital since the War of 1812. It was done by white nationalists. We just had a horrific massacre in Buffalo, New York, facilitated by someone who's following something called the Great Replacement Theory. He literally researched the closest black community, drove 200 miles to slaughter black people. This is what he did. Tens of millions are being radicalized every day online because they think Trump is the official president and they think the Great Replacement Theory is real. So we may see more of what happened in Buffalo across the country. And we see mass shootings every day. And speaking just briefly about the Great Replacement Theory, how many of you know about eugenics? Raise your hand if you know about eugenics. Many of you do. And as we know, when slavery ended in this country, it ended in terms of chattel slavery. There are other forms of oppression and slavery that persisted in our society. Jim Crow is one. Eugenics is another. The systemic degradation of the black race via sterilization, but also via standardized testing and how they're designed. There's a direct line from the eugenics movement, sterilization, the creation of standardized tests, and what they've been used for.
Yes.
And it connects directly today to the Great Replacement Theory. The bottom line is, the white race is king, everybody else, get out of here. So our fight, and if you don't believe our fight is rooted in that, who was our previous president? How did he get there? And ask yourself this question: if it weren't for COVID, what if we didn't have COVID? Would he be president again? Ask yourself, think about that. So, sorry to, tell you all of that, but if we're not honest about who we are, we will never achieve the vision and the ideals of our democracy. We have to be honest with who we are, we have to be honest with how we got here, and then we can create a new vision for where we need to go. And I think that vision includes all of us, a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-economic, multi-religious, multi-gender democracy where everyone can thrive. But we need leaders, and we need help. So there were, and I'll close on this, and sorry for speaking so long. There, throughout American history, we've had the abolitionist movement, the suffrage movement, the LGBTQ movement, many movements throughout history, civil rights movement, and it was those movements that made transformative change. We need another movement right now. And we need people in the streets and on the phones and writing letters and on social and on email and a part of this movement. Not for a season, but at least for a decade. And I say for the rest of our lives, because democracy is a contact sport. And if we don't engage and keep it, we will lose it. And we are close to losing it right now. So I need you, we need you, our children need you, and you know it. So I need a national teachers movement, I need a national children's movement, and I need a national parents movement to lead this human rights movement that I think we need right now. So it's up to y'all to start that movement. So after you have fun tonight, let's get started. And I'm here to support you in any way I can. God bless you. I love you. Have a good evening.
Okay, Colin, where do you want to start? Where do you want to begin?
Oh, God, there's a lot. So overall, I mean, he knew his audience. I'll say that. I honestly, and I want to be very fair, there's a lot that I didn't mind him saying. I thought overall it was a good speech. The problem is he started talking about, the issues in education in connection to economics. I wish he would have went deeper into that, because it just kind of seems like he kind of made it seem like the issue, and especially since he brought up the great replacement theory and eugenics, he kind of alluded to it in terms of it being like a white ringer thing. Yeah. And actually last week on INN, I pulled up an article from Harvard that talks about how eugenics started in academia in this country. Harvard being the main culprit in that. So the idea of eugenics is not a white wing thing. You could argue that they were the progressives of their day that were implementing it and using Congress to further, the idea of eugenics into this country. Same thing with the great replacement theory. I'm actually going to go into that a little bit more tomorrow night, because seeing this, I figured this needed to be spoken about in two parts. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say too much. Watch the stream tomorrow night. But basically, like, the great replacement theory is tied to capitalism as well. Yep. So you have to wonder, like, is Jamaal Bowman not saying this because he's naive to it? Or is it because he knows that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have said very recently, oh, we're capitalists, and so that will kind of infringe upon the very systems that are working in government that would kind of override anything that he would probably say normally had he really been able to kind of say what he wanted to say. So exactly. I just wished he would have gone a lot deeper, especially given that we're talking about, in schools, critical race theory and all of this, this is part of the truth that needs to be exposed, that he had the platform to talk about it and he didn't. So that was the issue that I had, that he didn't go into it deep enough to kind of make the connections for people who may not necessarily known as to, and he said himself, we need to know why. We need to figure out the why. And he had the opportunity to say why, and he didn't say it.
Right. Jamaal Bowman is one of the members of the squad that's really not willing to go. He's only willing to go so far. Like I always say, he's the weakest member. He really is. Right. He's the weakest link. And one of the things that was interesting to me that he mentioned in that speech, he's saying that we have to do it. Right. We have to do the work. We have to engage with our congressmen and women.
Right.
So let's talk about engaging with our congressmen and women, because I don't think the problem is that we're not trying to engage with them. They're not trying to engage with us.
Exactly.
And we've seen this happen multiple times, whether it's social media, whether it's writing letters to them, whether it's emailing them, asking them to come on. I've reached out to Rokana, I think twice. And so it's not even so much of us not trying to engage with them. And to prove my point, after he finished this speech, Colin, did he take questions from the audience?
Nope. He took a picture of us as the group and left. So he was only there for 20 minutes. So I have to preface that because I'm sure people in the chat might be saying, did you have the opportunity to ask any questions? No, I didn't, because he just bounced right after that, pretty much. But I do want to kind of mention something that we also kind of talked about on 9N News last week after watching it. Our guest last week, G. Jojo Nice, we both were at the Force to Vote protests last year. So he mentioned as far as, oh, you have to engage Congress. We did. He, I, Fiorella, Jackson, Nico House, Pasta, and many others were there 2 days before the insurrection, walking around the Capitol. Like, some of us were close to getting arrested in the idea of them forcing the vote so that to try to get Medicare for all, like, more in the consciousness, given that we were in the throes of COVID at that time.
Right.
And I know prior to that, there was a virtual town hall, which I know that the squad were invited to. They didn't show up. I also was at the Capitol last summer, and I know a lot of you know this, that I called out AOC and Cori Bush with Franco asking, you know, like, what are you going to do about the 10% of people who may not get benefits from the moratorium, that they're going to get evicted?
Right.
And what did they do? Turn the music on me and Franco.
Yes.
So the time that we have engaged them, you know, we've been ignored. But Jamaal has said, you need to engage us. AOC has said, you need to engage us. And yet when we do, they just dismiss us, because I think in their mind, we're not the right people to engage because we are part of the working class. So,
which they're supposed to be from too, though.
Right. And I know you had Cynthia McKinney on your show not so long ago, and I think it was her who mentioned that for them right now it's a matter of generational wealth, because many of the squad members do not come into money, you know. Right. So the idea of them being in Congress and kind of prolong as long as they can be there so that they're able to get their benefits, you know, they get their book deals, they get their speaking fees or whatever else, you know, like, they're working towards themselves as far as their career to make sure that they get what they need and what their family needs. But they're not necessarily thinking in terms of what we need on the ground. So that was the issue that I had, you know, with Jamaal Bowman. And they say a lot of the right things. And I think a lot of it is that he cannot say a lot of the right things because the Democrats are just as complicit in what the Republicans would naturally do in terms of making the others the fall guys. Yeah, like, Democrats may say, oh, we support you. We support Black people. We support people of color. We support the LGBT community. We support, you know, the people that Republicans generally kind of say, oh, these people are the fault of why this country is so bad. Yeah. But both parties are tied to the same money and the same donors. So it makes the Democrats look weak because they are complicit essentially in the fact that both they and the Republicans take the same money from the same corporations. So they really have no room to really say the fullness of what they should be saying if they really wanted to be for the people, to call out the Republicans and say, look, this is all tied to capitalism. And you guys are taking corporate money, you know, but they do the same thing. So they can't say that. Right.
Exactly. One of the things I want to point out for people who may not be aware in reference to what Colin was talking about, there was a lot of action last year at the Capitol. Afeni, Colin, Franco, Max Blumenthal, all of them, they're in that DC area, right? So they went to those actions, tried to talk to members of the squad. I know Afeni actually got to talk to AOC on, I guess, one-on-one because Afeni didn't have a camera. She wasn't filming. So AOC, I guess, felt more comfortable talking to her. But what AOC said to Afeni was that if you guys want them to do anything in here, you have to organize on the outside. That's the only way. And this came from AOC. That's the only way they're going to do anything. You have to put pressure on them. Now, why is that a problem? The problem is this was around the same time, or actually a little bit after the marches for Medicare for All. Every single one of them were contacted. I know for a fact, I was with the Boston March for Medicare for All here with organizer Kyle. I was the MC here. And I can tell you, all the representatives here in Massachusetts, they were contacted. And that includes Miss Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. And their offices confirmed that they got the message and that they would let them know. That includes Ayanna Pressley. So they did not respond. They knew it was happening. AOC knew those marches were happening. Bernie Sanders knew. All of them knew. And they didn't even tweet about it.
And I will say, because I wasn't at all the organizational meetings, but I was at some of them. So I knew some of the work that was going on behind the scenes. And I was helping to kind of get everything set up for the DC rally here last year. Cori Bush showed up, to ours. And when we asked her about it, she just said like, oh, I just saw it posted like on Twitter, which wasn't true because it was being suppressed. So she knew about it because she had heard about it prior to, because the organizers reached out to every single squad member, So I guess she felt guilty, so she made the appearance. But she lied and essentially said that she just heard about it that day when that wasn't true.
You have to understand, they were contacted months prior. Like they knew about it months beforehand. So that's why some of us on the organizing side, that's why we were so angry when AOC chose to go help Nina Turner get elected that same day that we had the marches for Medicare for All, because they knew about that date months prior.
Right.
So that's why now you guys are hearing this information, but I'm just saying that like for people who didn't understand why we were so upset, that's why we were so upset, because they knew about it far in advance. And so for them to physically, especially the ones who were already in DC, for them to not even make an appearance or even like tweet about it, it's appalling. Bernie Sanders, this is your movement. You are the one who brought Medicare for All to the forefront. He couldn't even tweet about it.
Right.
Because it wasn't being done through electoral politics. It wasn't being done through a campaign. So Jamaal Bowman's speech, when he sits here and he talks about, how we need to engage with our congressmen and women, we are trying to engage with them. We've been trying to engage with them. Jamaal Bowman is not telling that audience that it's his side that is not doing their part. They're the ones that are not speaking to their constituents. They're the ones that are not answering to them. And they're choosing to ignore independent media as well, when it was independent media that really gave them the platform and let everybody know who they were to begin with.
Right. And one other thing that I talked about on INN News last week, this was a story that we covered. Jamaal Bowman is talking about like great replacement theory and eugenics and all this stuff. Not to say there's an issue with any of those things, but I'm sure some of you may not necessarily know this, but right now in the country, schools are offering universal school lunch due to the pandemic. There's a waiver for that this year. That waiver expires next week.
Yep.
Now, Jamaal Bowman, you're a teacher, right? Surely you could be talking about this, as far as making sure that now, like school lunches are not that good. But but what will happen if that waiver expires? It goes back to the means tested way of, if you make this much money, then you can get a free lunch. If you make this certain amount of money, then you have to. So just more the bureaucracy of having the working class fill out paperwork to ensure that their children eat at school. And then, like, I know a lot of you, probably some of you noticed that schools are allowed to take, like, if you don't pay, like, you essentially have to make a credit that if you don't pay for your school lunch, then essentially you're not allowed to come to school. Yep. So this is an issue that Jamaal Bowman, that's an easy thing, like, that you should be advocating for, or anyone in the squad should be advocating for. But instead, you're talking about great replacement theory and eugenics, and again, within the means of a right-wing talking point, when the issue with both of those things have to do with the elite class, especially regarding eugenics, and then economics in terms of the great replacement theory. And as I said, I'm not going to talk more about it. You have to watch tomorrow night to see who will. But yeah, he mentioned it in his speech, but he didn't go all the way. And so I really would have appreciated, like, if he did, but it makes sense why he didn't, because that will become too close to in regards to what the party that he's in represents. And I'm sure they wouldn't want him talking about it in the fullness that he could have had.
Exactly. And I think I'm actually going to pull up that clip. If you give me just a second, I'll go ahead and fast forward to that. But I also want to show, I want to show you guys this reaction, because this was kind of funny.
Oh, thoughts, boys and girls.
Where do we begin? Oh my goodness. Jeez. Mike. What? Oh. Colin, you're a better man than me for sitting through 9.5 minutes of that. I swear. We're going to pick this apart like Thanksgiving turkey. Seriously.
Please do.
Oh my Lord. I mean, the one, when I went like about 6.5, 7 minutes in, when he says Congress has the power to do a lot of things. Yeah, it's words, not mine. Okay. Colin, you remember where you and I and about 35 of us were on January 4th and January 3rd of 2021.
And that's when he gets into the part that Colin mentioned earlier, how you guys were there for Force the Vote. So I do have that. I forgot to get out of this. I found that video. So I'm going to share that scene where Max Blumenthal asked her that question, because this was like months ago, and there's new viewers since then. So I do want to show you guys what we were talking about, because this is another example where here we are trying to engage with them. And I'm going to show you what she does. Excuse the lighting. This was back in the day. Let me go ahead and I'm going to mute my mic because I'll get an echo. Make sure my volume is up.
Well, that's where we are. And I heard, like, last night there was a lot less people. It's great to see so many more people, but I heard there was an intense debate about the role of the squad and why the squad didn't leverage its vote for the speaker for Medicare for All vote, and why the squad, I mean, with the margin so narrow in Congress, why the squad didn't because leverage its vote on the stimulus to get a $15 minimum wage. What?
No. So first, one thing that was said last night, which is something that's very true, and I wish we would have talked about that this was where your conversation was going, because we're talking about the rally for tonight. And I really would love to keep the conversation on what's happening.
I feel like it's all related to healthcare and the.
It absolutely is, but this is the thing. What was said last night is that this bill, Medicare for All, is not. No, there's no person on the squad whose bill that is. That is Bernie Sanders' bill in the Senate. It is Pramila Jayapal's bill in the House. It is not our bill. We cannot make that bill come to the floor. There is nothing that we can do legally to get the bill to the floor. We have
But Pelosi could have brought the bill to the floor.
We're good here. Thank you.
What? Well,
I'm sorry, man.
Well,
We're fine at this.
why can't she answer the question?
We're here to talk about the eviction.
But I feel like it's all about healthcare.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Really
that.
appreciate your
We're
time. Thank
here
you.
for a reason. It's about the moratorium.
Well,
Thank you so much.
why is that? I can't ask about Medicare for all.
The congresswoman has slept 1 hour. She's done a lot of labor.
Okay, I'm trying to get
respect your
people
work.
out here
I
too.
respect your work.
I'm trying to do the same thing you all are
Wonderful.
doing.
Thank you for being here.
But why
Appreciate
can't she could just answer it and then I go away? I'm not trying to like
Thank you.
attack her or anything. I'm not
We can-
trying
we're
to
happy give you a
smear her.
contact. We're happy to give you a contact and you can reach
But
out.
why is that issue the Medicare for all vote? So like she was
No,
wrapping up
I'm not
her,
having this
but she
conversation
was
with you.
wrapping
I'm
up her.
happy to give you-
I know she was
I'm happy-
wrapping up
I'm
her
happy to-
answer. Then
I'm
I was
happy
going to say thank you. Everybody come out.
I appreciate
But why
that.
didn't you let her just wrap up her
I
answer?
really appreciate you. We're happy to give you a contact. You can feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks.
That's what happens when we engage them. That's what happens. You see, she was totally for the conversation until it went to something that she didn't really want to talk about, which she should talk about, because she ran on it. All of them ran on Medicare for all. And you see what happens? You see how they walk away? AOC ran away from Franco when he was there to ask her the same questions. Like, it's just, this is what happens. So Jamaal Bowman's response in that speech telling people you need to engage with your congressmen and congresswomen. The problem is not us. The problem is them. They don't want to answer any tough questions, anything that's going to put them outside of their comfort zone, and they need to be held accountable. So it's just, this is the problem. Oh, I think you're muted, Colin. Sorry. Oh, there you go.
Oh, so yeah, I think that just makes it frustrating for us because, you know, especially people online who are kind of like, oh, like you're causing trouble. We're supposed to, you know, because that's the only way that we're going to get anything done. If we're not going to get anything done by being nice. And I know certain content creators say that we have to be nice to our politicians, you know, but right now it's like we're in desperate times right now. So it's like being nice is kind of out of the door, but you know, so it's just like, and being nice has not gotten us anything. So we need to be angry, but they don't respond to that either. So I think that's for us, because kind of like the catch-22 that we get is like politicians say, oh, we need to engage them. We need to engage them. And, you know, even Jamaal was saying like, yes, do what you can on the local level, but you also need to be concerned about the federal as well. I thought that was a little interesting because, you know, like we don't necessarily hear that, you know, like it's usually either one or the other. And then Jamaal's like, no, you have to do both. But when we have done both, or especially on the federal level, like we're dismissed. So, but yeah, I just figured, as I said, I wanted to record this because I figured it'd be content. But I think it's good to kind of see like their rhetoric does not match their actions. And I think especially for him being a part of the squad, you know, like he really doesn't have the room to say all these things, considering that, you know, like he hasn't really been active with us to ensure that any of these things that we want get passed. And like I said, you know, he has the opportunity to make sure children are getting fed next year. And given inflation, the thing with that is right now they're getting a little more than they usually do, which has helped, especially with inflation, so that, you know, certain schools may have to go outside, like having to go to other places to ensure they get the food that they need. If the waivers are cut, then like students will get less of an allowance for food a day. And given, you know, food is up right now. So, you know, so a lot of school districts are going to be struggling as far as how to feed kids. And that's something that Jamaal, as a teacher, should be calling out.
No, he was trying to focus on passing legislation around hip hop. Like
Which,
when I tell you, I'm not kidding. When I tell
no,
you
you're not kidding. And actually, no. I'm actually going to post that clip because we talked about that in the stream last night. I'm actually going to post that up later on Twitter. So those of you who follow me, you can catch that. But no, like Jamaal Bowman basically put in legislation to make like a hip hop month or some type of bullshit. And it's like, what? Like, this is the kind of mess that you're running for? You know? So, I mean,
crazy.
Overall, he said a lot of the right things for the audience that he was with, but I wish he would have gone a little deeper into some of the stuff that he was saying and not make the implication that it's all about Trump, it's all about the right wing. You know, there's a lot that his party has also caused that, or at least complicit in, that he didn't mention. But on the other hand, he gave me content to talk about it. So I gotta thank him for that at least.
That's true. Zeneb said Paula and I messaged Corey. Yeah, like they knew. Like it's embarrassing. Ashura, thank you for the super chat. Kyle and Krystal were in DC, no tweets or marches. But you know why, Ashura? Because Bernie Sanders and the squad didn't support the marches. This is the pattern that I have noticed. In order to get, especially the larger commentators, with the exception of Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy Dore was at the Medicare for All marches. With the exception of him, a lot of the larger platforms, they do not support these actions. They do not talk about these actions. I think Kyle did mention it on his show. Breaking Point sure as hell didn't. They don't talk about these actions unless it is backed by the squad or the Justice Democrats that are there in Congress. Anything else? No, they don't want to hear. And that goes to show you what's really happening here. Right. This is why we really haven't gotten anywhere, because people are so focused on that inside Democrat Party game, which has not really benefited any of us at all.
And you know what? Can I mention something, because this has been pissing me off a lot, because I'm seeing this a lot on Twitter, you know, just as far as, oh, Jimmy Dore doesn't do this, Jimmy Dore doesn't do that, Jimmy Dore does this or whatever. Look, I'm not making the case for Jimmy Dore or anything like that, but what I will say is you shouldn't expect Jimmy Dore or any one of the big commentators to really do the work as far as organizing. That's not his role. You know, that's why I think you and people like RBN and us and INN, that's our job. You know, like our job is to kind of help to organize on the ground. We shouldn't expect Jimmy to do all of that, but people are putting him on a pedestal and saying, oh, like he should be doing this, he should be doing that. Well, it's like, why aren't you doing it? You know, so I just get mad that like all this hate, you know, like, and again, Jimmy has his faults. We all do. But at least he has used his platform when it's necessary to highlight some of these issues, and many of the bigger ones too. So we have to give him props for that at least. But really the work, as Jamal's saying, should come from us. We should be the ones that should be doing the work, you know, not putting it all on your favorite podcaster or the ones that you hate, you know, like, oh, you should be doing a lot more. Like, if you want to organize the ways that you can, and I think we kind of do a decent job in trying to let people know how they can get involved in all that. But, you know, but don't put all that focus on one person just because you may like them or you may dislike them for whatever reason, and put them on the spot and being like, you should be doing this or whatever. Like, that's, and the other thing is, not everyone is meant to organize. Jimmy's not an organizer. So,
well, I will say this, you know, we're not expecting them to go out and organize, but I personally am expecting them to at least cover it or to at least mention it. Right. And I think that's where the disappointment comes in, because had all of the large networks covered the marches for Medicare for All, we would have had more people at those marches.
Right. And to be fair to Jimmy, and again, no matter what people say, he did talk about it. He did have the organizers on his show. He did went and speak. That's more than what we could say for like some of the other bigger channels. And I'm not going to mention them by name, but we know who they are. So, and I know you've said this on your show, like if these bigger channels were even to mention it once, that could have had a massive effect, but they don't want the working class involved. They only want the people, the organizations that are in their circles to be involved, and again, you guys are smart. You guys know who those organizations are, but yeah, we should be doing the work, not them, but I think a lot of us gone into this in part of we haven't want to do this as far as an organization arm too, where some of the larger channels may not necessarily, and again, no fault for them, but don't put all essentially your hope or your frustration on one person or several people that you may like or hate because you feel like they should be doing more. That really should be up to us. And, we try and do our part to make sure that we let people know when people are organizing, that we try and have, our audience know like how they can get involved, so, but yeah, I'm just going to leave it right there. But I just wanted to say that because I've been seeing that a lot. And I think it's really unnecessary when this is the very thing that we should be like coming together and trying to figure out like how can we have some of these policies that we want. Like you had Savage Joy and Andre for Medicare for All yesterday, and we talked off camera briefly, like both need to happen as far as federal and local. And if we do what we can within the local level, that's going to swell up to the federal level. So both are needed, in order to have people rally behind the idea. Because right now we're not even talking about Medicare for All, and last I checked, we're still in the pandemic.
Right. Well, the smaller channels are talking about it still, often.
Right.
I will say this also too. Thank you for this, Andrew, for the super chat. Kyle did mention the first Medicare for All. Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that. Krystal didn't, which I noticed a lot with these two. Kyle will say something and say Krystal agrees with him. Oh, that's a good point. But I mean, my thing is this. Yes, he did mention it, kudos for that. But he also mentioned it last minute. And I say this as someone, again, who was in those meetings with some of the organizers. Those people were reached out to way in advance to talk about it on their show, to bring Joy on, to bring other people on, any organizer that was involved with it, to bring them on the show. And so kudos that he did mention it, but it was literally last minute.
And just more, and kind of flippant in a sense.
Right.
Like he just said it like, oh, this is happening. And he didn't even know all the details.
No,
so
he
it's
didn't
just
know
kind of
the
like,
details.
I heard about the thing that's happening. This is a good thing. You guys should go. And it was like, no, like that's not going to help anybody, and especially since Kyle lives in New York, there was a march in New York. If he really wanted to, he could have gone, especially given what happened within his home family. You would think that he'd have a personal stake at this.
Right.
But he didn't. So
I just want to add too, it's important for people to know Susan Sarandon was at the march in New York City.
Right.
So it's like, this is the thing. Like, you don't just pull something off of Twitter. And I can tell that's probably what happened. You don't just pull something off of Twitter and say, hey, there's like these marches going on for Medicare for All, like all these different cities. Oh, wow. I don't know who organized this. I don't know who's in charge of this. No, that's poor journalism. And I don't believe that, because like I said, all of those people were contacted multiple times. The organizer information was, if you didn't know who they were, there was the Medicare for All tweet group on Twitter. All you had to do was click on the Medicare for All, just little, profile pic, and you would have been able to see who was who. But to not even go that far, like that just kind of said something to me. That felt lazy. Like, I'm sorry, but
yeah. So
it felt lazy.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, it's more work for us, but we have to be the ones to kind of do I think, put the message out there just as far as, organizing and direct action and mutual aid and all these other practices to try and ensure to get people what they need right now, but also to try and build the idea of, like, these are issues that we need, and we need to be in solidarity with one another, because at the end of the day, as you say all the time, this is a matter of class, so if we're able to have connections with people who are not look like us, or maybe ideologically or politically, may not think or believe in the same things, but if we are able to come together on certain issues, then that's great. But that friends the establishment, because they benefit off of us fighting among another. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what the larger channels are doing, making all these picking fights among, like, oh, this person said this, or this person said that, when they could be using their platforms to be like, we need to organize, we need to work together. And I'm not seeing a lot. I think generally we do a good job at that, but I'm not seeing it necessarily from the larger channels. Like, they just get into, like, the drama of it all, like with this person or that person, and not really expressing the true issues that are really tied to us, for people who are among the working class.
Right. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I do want to address something really quick from Zena. I don't even like Krystal, but it's no wonder she ignores us, because instead of reaching out, we spend so much time trying to expose her because she believes in electoralism. No. Those people, as Colin here with me, as someone else in this space, those people have been contacted multiple times. This is going all the way back over a year ago. So don't think that just because you don't hear them talk about something, or you don't see them on our platform, or you don't see them at a direct action event or mention it, that doesn't mean they haven't been contacted. Again, I told you this is a class issue.
Right.
And that's all basis.
And to speak of Krystal, she knew about Force the Vote.
Right.
So she knew about that, but she didn't know about the marches after that. Doesn't make much sense to me, especially since Kyle knew about it again last minute. Like, and if he knew about it, why couldn't Krystal and Saga talk about it on their show?
Right.
In fact, actually, Ryan Grimm knew about it.
Yep.
Because he talked about it and smeared it. So, so it's not a big club, guys. Like, a lot of the larger channels, they know each other. Like, they probably have each other's, probably not so much anymore, but like once upon a time, they have each other's phone numbers, I'm pretty sure. So they know all this information that's coming in, and they talk to each other. So it's not impossible to think that they don't know what's happening or what's being talked about in the space. They know, but they choose not to because it affects their brand or their donors, depending which is which. But
they have DM groups just like we have DM groups. They know what's going on. They pick and choose what they want to go to, and if they feel that in any way it's going to cause their audience to give them a side eye, then they won't mention it. That's how it works. Yeah. So, like I said, it is a class divide.
Right.
But I do want to say also, Colin, because I do want to get into the next story, but this is coming from Jonathan. He has a good point here. Just in case you didn't know, New York City public schools are slated to lose $250 million from their budget, yet Jamaal said nothing about that.
Exactly. And like, one thing that I do, locally, just as far as my advocacy program, is to try uplift the issues that teachers have in the DC area and uplift them to our local government officials. That's my job, essentially, is to bring the attention of things that they may not necessarily hear from teachers who are actually doing the work. So I am actually essentially being like the advocate as far as these are issues that teachers and families and students are talking about. You need to do something about it. That's my job. Keep in mind, I don't get paid to do that. Like, I volunteer to do that. Jamaal gets paid to be aware of what's happening within his community and in his district. And the fact that he's not even mentioning anything about this as a teacher, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Like that should be an easy thing, and people can easily rally around something like that, especially right now.
I just think that teachers are just incredibly taken for granted in this country. There's a lot of things that teachers do that they're not paid for, that people just don't see. You don't see unless you're in education.
Right. And teachers are leaving, well, you're an educator, you just left and actually, and I'll say this now, I'm actually thinking of leaving the profession next year. Like, I'm just thinking out my escape plan of how to get out. And I don't want to, because I love being in the classroom. I love working with my students. But given the pandemic, well, the issues were already there, but the pandemic has heightened a lot of those issues. And we're doing twice the work, or expected to, we're back to normal now, do the same work. And we're screaming, we can't. It is not normal.
Right.
Children are still getting sick. Teachers are still getting sick. And we have to kind of juggle all of that in the midst of our own teaching. And so teachers are being asked to do way above and beyond what I think is normal. And teachers, I think, fortunately, are having a backbone and saying, we don't, if this is what it means to really sacrifice literally your body in order to do the work, we're not doing it anymore. And personally, that's where I'm at right now. It's like, I love my students, but I love me more. And if I'm going to, essentially have a nervous breakdown at my job in the name of having a job, then I'd rather not do it.
Right. Eric Gray, I'm thinking about an escape plan from education myself, Colin and Sabby. Yeah, I left and never looked back. Yeah. Jonathan, I plan on leaving next year. Colin, yeah.
But you know what, though? Here's the thing, and that's the other thing I'll just mention kind of quickly. There's more to why I'm leaving, but the other part is, I think especially being in this space and knowing what I know, especially, working in INN and how it relates to education, once you see it, you can't unsee it. No. And for me, it's I feel like I'm complicit in the mess. It's just as far as the educational bureaucracy in this country that I feel like I'm being complicit too. And so a lot of that for me is I don't want to do that anymore. I fought when I was 18, when I decided to be a teacher, I knew it was hard, but I was if I just worked in my classroom and do what I needed to do, then I'll make a difference that way. And that will be okay. And I think especially now becoming a little more aware of how things politically work, especially in the education system. I hate saying this, but unless there's a revolution in terms of how children are educated, and we're not even educating children the right way, in my opinion. We're educating children to essentially be slaves to capitalism, not to push the narrative to try to make things better for themselves. We're not teaching our children to be able to be revolutionaries, we're training them essentially to be cogs in the machine. And I don't want to do that. And I feel right now, if I want to be in education, if I want to push for that, I have to do that from the outside and not doing it from inside in, case in point, the squad, they thought, if we just do what we need to do, then things will change. And look at what's happening to them. So kind of taking a lesson from that for myself is I'd rather get out. But if I'm going to fight for education, it'll be a lot easier if I'm outside of it versus being inside and being pushed down by that system. So
well said. Thanks so much, Colin. I'm going to get into the next story, but Colin, before you go, where can people find you? Because I saw people asking because they want to see your part 2, definitely, of that Jamaal Bowman.
Yeah. So if you go to Indie News Network, INN, you could find me there. I generally am on there with Reef Freeland, my co-host, every Wednesday at usually around 9 Eastern Standard Time. I also have my personal channel, Kamal Mukwano, which is more specific to issues related to Africa and how that translates to people within the diaspora. I haven't done a lot on that channel, honestly, because I've been so committed to like INN, but I hope, over the summer, as I have some time off, that I'm able to get at least a couple of things on content within my personal channel as well. And then you can also mostly, I'm very active on Twitter. So if you find me on Twitter at Obona_Colin, you can find me there and rant and rave.
Awesome. There's a question for Colin. Oh, go ahead, Eric. Add it to the screen. I think it's from Rockfin.
Okay. So it's probably Roger.
It's Roger Meadows.
Watch your shows.
Where is the okay, thanks for the tip, Roger Meadows. Colin, do you know what New York State Senate district you will be in now that the new Senate district lines are drawn and will take effect in January? I'm trying to reach out and assemble something among us New Yorkers across the state to push Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins to bring the New York Health Act, which has majority support in both chambers, although that might change after this year's election, to the floor for a vote. I want to hang posters in her district for the next 2 years, alerting her constituents to the existence of the New York Health Act, since most never heard of it, inform them, and then tell them that it is their senator who is the leader who refuses to bring it up for a vote. Her district has been most of Westchester, which includes her hometown in Yonkers, and guess who? Kalinsky. You guys say, I don't know what happened there, Eric. Okay. You guys say Kyle never covered Medicare for All March. Shoot, he didn't even cover us in Albany about his own senator, who is the Senate Majority Leader. I want to put pressure on her to do this. She's too busy protecting union leadership who own stock in private insurance and make money from selling to their members. What does that do for the rest of us New Yorkers? Nothing. Union members would see an increase in the salary if the state took care of their health care. I already reached out to LPA Films, well, only on that chat, but it is a reach on nothing less. I am going to reach out to Scott Denanos also, and whoever else I can get to get this done. I'm going to reach out to Northwest Bronx Coalition with Co-op Ride, teamed up with to march to Assembly Speaker Heastie's office in the Bronx, then Stu Cousins' office in Yonkers to do the same. We went to delivered signed postcards of people who are suffering from bad health care to her Albany office a month ago, and she locked the doors and called the cops on us. We didn't get roughed up or anything, but that is what happened. However, what I really want above all of it is to put pressure on them to put forth ballot initiative amendment before us that allow New Yorkers to pass New York State law and amendments to New York State. Constitution is using a direct ballot initiative process, going to completely around New York State government to place initiatives on the ballot. Plus, in that amendment to allow us to be a BI state, a ban on astroturfing and other big money to stop big money in the BI process. We get that passed, we can govern ourselves. So Colin, are you going to a New York district?
No, I'm not in New York.
I didn't think so. Oh, okay,
no, I'm not in New York. He must have thought I'm in New York. No, sorry, Roger, I'm in DC.
Yeah,
so.
I thought. Okay, all right. Well, Colin. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. But all that to say, one thing we're trying to do in INN News is, like, obviously we want to try and cover some of the major stories, but one thing that we want to do more, especially as we're growing, is to cover stories that are not necessarily talked about. So I'm just saying to you guys in the chat, like, any stories that you feel like we should be talking about more, especially in this space. If you follow me on Twitter, DM me, and let me know of what stories that you think that should be covered. And then we could potentially have you on as a guest to talk about it. We've done it before, or we can just report on those stories as well. So we want to try and get a little more variety just in the stories, just so we're not all talking about the same thing, but also to just kind of see how things are working like throughout the country and around the world in terms of issues within the working class that people are needing to know that you may not necessarily know about on the larger channels as well. So let me know, DM me if there are stories like that that should be covered.
Awesome. Colin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sabby.
Bye.
Have a good night.
All right, guys. Let's go ahead and get into our second story. But really quick, I do want to give a shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there with me on Patreon land. If you're interested in becoming a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and Ultimates. All of their names are listed here. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate the support. It really does go a long way. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen as well. Okie doke. Let me go ahead and shout out these super chats really quick, and then we're going to get into the Richard Wolff story. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. I do agree we need educators on the front line, but those educators need to actually do something. As far as engaging Congress, that includes Bowman. I know. Delthea said, if you don't have a capitalist critique, you don't have a racial critique. That's a good point. Snooze in 84, Sabby Sabs, the speech was divisive. The idea that Trump voters should be excluded and dismissed as racist, ignore economic desperation many of them felt and voted on. Example, Trump said U.S. should leave TPP. Good point. Thank you for the super chat, Ava. I think it's time we take the hint and lead this movement ourselves. Stop chasing after politicians. They are irrelevant at this point. Let them chase us. Oh, that's a good point, Ava. And thank you for the super chat, Wesley Whole Wheat. No one is going to help us. Our system has failed. It's a sad state of affairs. All right. I want to get into the next story. Now, this one is about Richard Wolff. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Richard Wolff's economic update, but this is one, I guess you could say, series that I do make an effort to watch every week because I like to get my economic news from Richard Wolff. But he has two YouTube channels. He has one called Professor Richard Wolff, and he has one called Democracy at Work. The economic update series is on his Democracy at Work channel. So just got to put that out there so people don't get confused. There's 2 parts in this I want to play. Now, the first part is where Richard Wolff is discussing why we really have inflation right now. And I said, I got to play this for you guys because I really want you to hear the true story about this, because people are using other talking points, obviously. The second part that I want to show in this clip, he has a short, brief interview with Krystal talking about political shifts. And I think that's important for you guys to hear because it kind of shows you where we are politically in this country right now versus 2008 when Obama went into office. So let's go ahead and get into the first part where he talks about inflation, why we actually have inflation right now. And for those of you who have been listening to mainstream media, this is going to be different than what you may have heard on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. So here we go.
You belong to. I want to talk about the economics of the sanctions, the effort of the West, led by the United States, to punish, that's the word they use, Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Much of the impact on the inflation around the world that comes is not coming because of the war. It's coming to us because of the sanctions. And that needs to be understood. The sanctions begin when the...
Okay, I'm going to let him finish, but I wanted you to hear that. Richard Wolff just told you the inflation that we have right now is not coming to us because of the war. It's coming to us because of the sanctions. So I wanted everyone to hear that, and he's going to go into detail.
United States and Western Europe take some of the financial reserves that Russia uses to support and back up its currency, cuts off trade, cuts off access to airplane travel, cuts off corporations, formally, informally, continuing their operations in Russia. It's a many-sided attack on the economy, basically, of Russia. And this is having consequences, and it's important to understand what they are and why they're there as you think about this war as it continues. And I'm going to give you an example you may not know, just to show you the complexity of this sanction warfare and its consequences. Early on, right after the invasion, the United States, Western Europe begins cutting off access to its airports for Russian airlines. Okay. Predictably, because the Russians said so, there were countermeasures. And one of them involved the Russians not allowing airplanes sitting on runways and sitting in parking lots in Russian airports to leave. Well, those are airlines that the Western companies who own those airlines or who lease them have come to depend on. Those planes have to move if they're going to be used around the world. They can't move. The Russians won't let them. It's a counter sanction. Well, what?
So something to keep in mind, those planes do, like he said, those planes have to move around the world. So if the planes can't move, that doesn't just affect Russia, that's going to affect all of us. So it kind of backfired in a way.
What happens then, just so you get it, is that the airline companies being damaged by these programs of sanctions on all manner of levels turn to their insurance companies and say, hey, we pay you an insurance policy to help us, to compensate us for our losses if anything happens to interfere in air traffic. Now there's a big struggle going on between the airlines and the insurers. But the insurers know that sooner or later they're going to have to fork up huge amounts of money because of all the air traffic that isn't happening and causing vast losses to the airlines. That means insurance companies are going to be out of money. And guess what they are? Highly concentrated industry. And if they're losing money in one area, they're raising it in another. That is, rates everywhere are going up, which means every other business that insures itself, which is most businesses, are going to pay higher rates. And you know how they cover themselves when that happens? They
Here it comes.
Raise the prices of what they charge, which is why we have an inflation.
Could you imagine being in Professor Wolff's class? I like the way he explains economics. He really breaks it down and he always uses examples. That's why I like watching his economic update. Just something to note.
It's the sanctions, not the warfare, that is the problem here. And I could go on and talk about how the airline companies and the insurers talk about supply chain disruptions. That's a vague, abstract term. The reality are the consequences of the sanction game. And that's what we need to understand. And here's what.
Okay, so that's another one that's debunked. Because some people are saying, oh, it's because of the war. Some people are saying, this is mainly mainstream media, by the way. Some people are also saying, oh, it's a supply chain issue. But he just told you, even when it comes to the supply chain, that's still not the root cause. The root cause are the sanctions.
One more. When a sanction is imposed, it means you can't do normal business. That's the whole point of the sanction. So normal business is what every business organizes to have the best profit possible. If suddenly they can't move because airline traffic has stopped, or they can't move because money can't move around the world, they have to go to a second best, something that's less profitable. And how do they offset the damage to their profits of having to react? They raise their prices. There's another inflation. Unless you think this is temporary, worry this way. Everybody who's adjusting, every business that adjusts to to sanctions, has to ask itself, how much money am I going to spend to reroute my activity this way, that way, to go to this provider rather than that one, to cut off my dependence on a Russian intermediary? I don't want to spend a lot of money to adjust. Why? Because I don't know how long these sanctions are going to last. And I don't.
See, this is something that I brought up early on when they were announcing that they were implementing sanctions. I was like, that's not going to work out for us. I have to go back and find that video, that episode. I forget which one that was. This is why it's good to listen to Professor Wolff.
Want to spend a ton of money and discover 3 weeks later that it was for nothing. And I'm going back to what we did before. So the very uncertainty of a war means the sanction regime is unknowable, and businesses are hesitating to spend the money to fix it. And therefore the price increase becomes the more attractive way to try to keep your profits.
Has anybody that you've listened to recently explained it to you like that? I haven't seen anyone break it down like that. That's why I like to listen to Professor Richard Wolff. Now, that's the first part of this clip that I wanted you to hear about the sanctions, about inflation. If you want to share this video, actually, I'm going to put the link to this in the chat because, like I said, he has 2 channels. Hold on. And I don't want you guys to get confused by accidentally going to the other channel. So here's the link to this video, just in case you want to share that with someone else when they mention to you about inflation. Might be good to share this little tidbit. Now, I do want to go into the second part of this video as well. This is where he has the discussion with Krystal about political shift. And that should be at 16-minute start time. So, whoops, I wasn't supposed to show you guys that. You weren't supposed to see my little time stamps there. I almost said time the wrong way too, just like I would people do in Massachusetts, but I've lived here for too long. I'm starting to lose letters in my words. All right. So this clip here, Richard Wolff is talking to Krystal Ball about the political shift that's happening in the country. I thought this was a really interesting discussion, and I'll chime in here and there. So here we go.
Good. I want to, in a way, pick your brain for our audience. You've been watching closely, literally every day, a shift in the politics of this country to the right, however you variously express it. And I want to ask you, A, whether you agree, whether there has been this shift, but more interesting, I'm more interested in how you feel about it, how you understand it, where you think it comes from, and where it goes.
Well, where it goes, I think, is anyone's.
So what he's asking here, the shift that seems to be happening to the right, although I would argue this is more of a class shift. It's more like people paying attention to class issues versus necessarily moving to the right per se. But he's asking about this shift that seems to be happening where people seem to be moving further to the right instead of further to the left. When I talk about left here, I do want to say to people who are new, I'm not referring to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not left. When I say left, I'm referring to progressive movement, socialist left, whereas liberalism or neoliberalism is not left. I just want to make that clear if you're new, like watching me for the first time. So that's what he's asking her about. And I want you to hear her response.
Yes. Do I think that the politics, especially of the elite political class that runs the country, have consistently moved to the right? Yes. And I think it only makes sense since we're basically in this era of sort of a shared economic vision of neoliberalism.
So she says two things here, just a second, about the elite class.
How you understand it, where you think it comes from, and then where it goes.
Well, where it goes, I think, is anyone's guess. Do I think that the politics, especially of the elite political class that runs the country, have consistently moved to the right? Yes. And I think.
Okay, that part right there. She said the elite political class that runs the country has moved to the right. I would actually argue, and I get where she's coming from with that, but I would actually argue when I think of people that are elite, billionaires, millionaires, and we talked about this earlier on RBN, that at the end of the day, for people who are in that class, it really doesn't matter if they're on the right or the left. They're rich. They're going to get what they want regardless. And I think that, again, this goes back to a class issue. Rich people are going to get what they want because they have the economic means to do so. If someone is rich and they're arrested, they're more likely to get off, right? They're more likely to be able to hire the best attorney. They're more likely to have contacts, connections, people that they can network with to get them a less of a charge, even if they're going to be charged with anything regardless. So that's what something I would argue. It's more that people who are in that class, those rich people, it doesn't matter. They can switch from left to right to in the middle to up in the clouds at any point. Because the system that we have in this country that's in place, it serves the rich. It protects the rich. I said the reach. I told you I'm losing consonants in my words. It serves and protects the rich. The policing system serves and protects the rich. All of the systems that we have in this country work out pretty well for the most part for people who are wealthy. It's people who are working class, people who are poor. Let's throw in middle class too, actually. All things considering today. Middle class, poor, working class, those are the people that the systems in this country, for the most part, don't work out for. So I do want to say that I get where she's coming from, but I'd like us to not think of this just as left versus right. Whenever we bring in the term elites, I want to remind everyone that that's a class issue. And regardless if that person's on the left or the right, they're still going to be rich. So they're covered, they're protected. So I do want to mention that part.
It only makes sense since we're basically in this era of sort of a shared economic vision of neoliberalism, which is fundamentally, a conservative or a right-wing ideology. And since you have both parties effectively buying into that, then it only makes.
Okay, that's something that Krystal said here that I want you to pay close attention to because she's right here. Listen to this.
I think, is anyone's guess. Do I think that the politics, especially of the elite political class that runs the country, have consistently moved to the right? Yes. And I think it only makes sense since we're basically in this era of sort of a shared economic vision of neoliberalism, which is fundamentally, a conservative or a right-wing ideology. And since you have both parties effectively buying into that, then.
And this is the point that we keep trying to tell you on RBN. When you look at neoliberalism, like Krystal just told you, you have both parties buying into that, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And this is why I continue to tell people that you need to go outside of the two-party system because it's two wings of the same bird, right? So you have one party that says they're right wing, but the Democratic Party is still like center right wing. Neither one of them are moving to the left. This is why groups like the Squad, the Progressives, we could argue about the Squad recently with their performances, but this is why a Bernie Sanders movement, progressives, leftists, socialists, whatever you want to call yourself today, anything left of that neoliberalism. This is why the Republican Party and the Democratic Party considers it to be a threat. This is exactly why Republicans are against progressive policies and the corporate Democrats in DC are against progressive policies, because neither one of them are actually left. They're both technically on the right. One just happens to be a little bit more left-leaning when it comes to social issues. But when it comes to corporations, when it comes to donors, when it comes to Wall Street, when it comes to money that is not for the people, both parties serve corporate interest. And that's why they don't pass any type of legislation, for the most part, that doesn't have some type of corporate interest attached to it. That's why. Krystal just let you know what we've been saying for a long time. Both parties are neoliberal. Both of them.
It only makes sense that, the only shift occurs consistently to the right. You have Democrats basically trying to be like the Republicans on economics ever since the Clinton era and probably before. In terms of the population, I think it's really mixed. And you see this not just in the US, but you see it around the world. There's clearly a rejection of this quote unquote free market obsession, where rather than having any sort of values or principles or commitment to humanity governing your society, you outsource everything to the markets. And what that ends up meaning, of course, in practice is that the rich get richer and richer and everybody else is effectively left behind.
She's right. And I refer to that as capitalism. This is why I'm a socialist, because there's no limit. There's no limit. If we had a limit on capitalism in this country, or if we had guardrails on capitalism, people in Southern California wouldn't have to pay $7, $8 for a gallon of gas. I told you guys my words all over the place tonight. For a gallon of gas. There's just no control. Companies can do whatever they want. And it's true. The system that we live in right now, the rich get richer and richer, and people who are poor get more and more poor. That's capitalism, though. And sometimes when I hear people have these talking points about this subject, particularly on mainstream media, they don't want to say that word. They don't want to say, oh my God, the prices are high. People just keep getting rich and rich. People who are poor are really struggling. What are we going to do about healthcare in this country? What are we going to do about the education system? And it all can be summed up with one word, which is capitalism, but you won't hear them mention it. You won't hear them mention this on CNN or Fox News, that the problem is capitalism. They don't want them to say that to people. They really don't. But that's what it is. That's the problem. So when people come to me and they say, oh, well, you can just put like guardrails on capitalism. You can't. We've been living this for what? How many years? Let's go back in.
And so we see around the world this complete rejection of that paradigm. And in some places that leads to, figures like Donald Trump, figures like Jair Bolsonaro, figures like, events like Brexit. You see this sort of quote unquote populist, right? Although I would dispute the idea that they're really populist, the rise of that energy. But you also see a countervailing force on the left.
But the reason why you had people vote for someone like Trump is because he ran on class issues, at least in 2016. He focused on class issues. That was his appeal to some people. Now, yes, there are those ones that they're Republican and they'll always vote Republican regardless who the candidate is. I know people like that. I know people like that on the Democrat side too. But there were also the people that voted for Obama twice and then turned around and voted for Trump. So I think there's something to be said there for those groups of people. So he was talking about class issues. He talked about draining the swamp. He talked about the corruption. That was the appeal to Trump. Why was you had such a strong appeal to Bernie Sanders as well? What did Bernie Sanders talk about when he ran in 2016? He talked about corruption a lot, which made sense for his campaign during that time because he was going against Hillary Clinton in the primary. And then also, if he would have won, he would have been going against Trump as well. And Trump is rich. That's something Bernie didn't do for his 2020 campaign. He didn't stress the corruption portion as much as he did for the 2016 campaign. So that's why I say the 2016 campaign was the revolutionary campaign and the 2020 campaign was watered down a bit. So again, for people who want to look at this in terms of left versus right, I would ask, was it necessarily left versus right? Or was it that people were focusing on class issues? And so if you're new watching me, something I've been telling people recently is that I'm going to stop calling these issues like Medicare for all, canceling student loan debt, paid family leave, a lot of these issues that were part of Bernie Sanders' campaign. I'm going to stop calling them progressive issues because at the end of the day, these are class issues. These are issues that people who are not of that wealthy elite class actually need to happen for their lives. If you are rich, if you are wealthy, you 9 times out of 10 don't need Medicare for all. So you don't really care if that passes or not. You probably have gold-plated health insurance, just like our members of Congress, by the way. But if you're poor, if you're working class, and even for some of you that are middle class, you might need Medicare for all. Because even if you do have health insurance, it may not cover the majority of things that you need for it to cover. So I'm going to call them class issues. And I think this is the mistake that we've been making for a long time when we have these conversations. We keep talking about this as right-wing issues and left-wing issues, but the issues that were on Bernie Sanders' platform were class issues. So I think we need to do more of that.
And, you know, you talked a little bit about my bio. My politics have shifted significantly since I was first running for Congress in the 1st District of Virginia, or even when I was on MSNBC and I was a big, Democratic Party cheerleader. There now is, for the first time in my life, a real grounded critique of the Democratic Party that is sort of shared and becoming increasingly mainstream from the left. So you have these two competing factions, neither of which, certainly the left half of which, is not represented in terms of institutions of power. But
yeah, and I think the only problem here, though, is that even though the Democratic Party is being heavily criticized from the left, unfortunately, because mainstream media outlets seem to have blackballed leftists from coming onto those platforms and sharing that message and that ideology, the majority of Americans actually have no idea just how many people are fed up with the Democratic Party. That's the problem. You'll watch them every day. They will constantly make excuses for Joe Biden. I'm sick of it. And if you are only watching CNN, if you are only watching MSNBC, it's easy to believe that narrative that Joe Biden is doing the best that he can. It's easy to believe the percentages that they show you about his approval rating. And I told you, I would argue it's lower than what they say it is. That's the problem. Even though there is this large criticism of the Democratic Party from the left, the majority of Americans are not getting the opportunity to hear it because mainstream media is not allowing that narrative to come onto their platforms. That's a big problem. So in order to tackle this, there's two things that need to be done. And I've mentioned the first one multiple times. You have to get money out of politics. It's a big problem. And I say that because some of the same corporations that donate to politicians are also shareholders in mainstream media, with networks like CNN, with networks like MSNBC and Fox News. The second problem, it's the media. The media, I think, was the biggest killer of Bernie Sanders campaigns. The media. But what can you do when the censorship is so strong with independent media? How do you get that message across to more and more people when those of us who are independent commentators and journalists, we're not being brought onto those mainstream platforms? And at the same time, the platforms that we are on, we have to try to twist and bend our way like a pretzel around an algorithm that can change next week. And they still censor our content as well. Getting information out to the masses about what is really going on and how these political or these politicians that we have are controlled, how the mainstream media is not giving you the whole story. Getting that narrative out to the masses is probably one of the most challenging things about doing this. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's a big problem. Big problem. Let's go back in.
Which is growing in strength and acceptance among a broad part of the public. That's kind of how I see things.
Wow. Okay, following right on that, how do you assess, and it's really your vision that I'm after here, the so-called culture wars that we're having, whether it's around guns or abortion or all those kinds of issues. What relationship, if any, do you see between wars over culture and the old traditional class struggle between rich and poor, between employer and employee and all of that?
Well, I am of the opinion that there is no war but class war. So I see these things all tying in, and it's too easy to say that culture war issues, like you just mentioned, gun rights or abortion or white supremacy, that these are distractions. What I think they are instead is they mask these deeper issues of class and of economics and of distribution. So to explain what I mean, I just recently looked.
Okay, so let's chime in here for just a second, because I do want to mention something here, because I think people might take this the wrong way. In reference to the culture wars, I think what she's getting at is that you're not looking at the deeper issue. She's going to bring up the topic about abortion, and I'm going to mention something here in reference to that as well. Abortion, yes, is an important issue. Am I pro-choice? 100%. Here's the problem. Let's say that they do not overturn Roe v. Wade, which hopefully they will, but I don't know. These people are crazy, right? The problem with just focusing on the abortion aspect and not focusing on the class consciousness when it comes to abortion is that even people who are poor and working class, even if they live in a state and they can get an abortion there, the problem is people who don't have the economic means to do so will still struggle to have that access to abortion. It's a problem right now. People who are wealthy, regardless if abortion is overturned or not, they'll still be able to get an abortion. Just like they could 50, 60, 70 years ago. Because wealthy people always find other ways to get it done. They're more connected. If they have to leave the country and get it done in another country, they have the economic means to do so to be able to get that done. People who are poor and working class, they can't. And for people who say, well, why don't they just go to another state? Not everyone can do that. If you're relying on your health insurance to pay for it for you, good luck. Some health insurance companies don't cover it. So then what? So I think that's the point that she's trying to make here. And I do want people to understand that, because sometimes when people come in and they say, don't look at culture wars, we don't need to pay attention to that, it can be taken the wrong way. But I do think there's a part here where she actually breaks that down and explains, like, you still have to look at the economic impact as well. So listen to this.
looked into this with regards to the abortion debate and the imminent end of Roe versus Wade, which I think is really important because I think women should have control over their lives, over their bodies, over their autonomy, over when and how to start a family. But the reason why that debate sort of masks what's really going on is even if pro-choice advocates like myself get what they want, the idea that having, ready access to abortion is going to actually give women autonomy is just not true. And in fact, because we don't have the economic structures in place to support women and have the full range of choices available to them from an institutional and societal perspective. In fact, something like 74% of women who get abortions are poor. So,
did you hear that? That's why I was telling people when we had the panel a couple weeks ago, the women that are going to be affected by this overturn is going to be predominantly women who are poor and working class.
Class is the underlying factor here. And, the surface level debate over whether or not you can get an abortion is really masking the deeper problems that are leading women to make that choice to start with. But abortion is basically split sort of 50-50 down the middle. So it's this great wedge, divisive culture war issue. It's very easy to have an opinionated take on it. It's extremely emotional and raw and sensitive. And it serves the interests of the status quo, because if you were having debate about wages, about unions, about democracy in the workplace, something you talk about, well, those are issues that are like 80-20 and they don't benefit the status quo. So we have
1 second. One thing I want to add in here. I'm sorry, I went too far. Right about here. One thing I want to add into in reference to abortion and the overall issue. Abortion is also healthcare. So if we don't have Medicare for all in this country, if everyone does not have healthcare, and you're one of those people where you need to get an abortion and you don't have it, what do? So I want people to remember that abortion is still tied to healthcare. So that's still a healthcare issue as well as a class issue. And Krystal's mentioning all this, and this is important for people to know. And I want to remind you as well, no shade on Krystal, but she's a part of that class where she won't be affected. The majority of women that will be affected by this are people who are low income, working class, poor, and women of color. She doesn't fall into any of those categories, so she won't be affected. Just something to note. Now we're going to go into the wage issue.
What's really going on is even if pro-choice advocates like myself get what they want, the idea that having, ready access to abortion is going to actually give women autonomy is just not true. And in fact, because we don't have the economic structures in place to support women and have the full range of choices available to them from an institutional and societal perspective. In fact, something like 74% of women who get abortions are poor. So class is the underlying factor here. And, the surface level debate over whether or not you can get an abortion is really masking the deeper problems that are leading women to make that choice to start with. But, abortion is basically split sort of 50-50 down the middle. So it's this great wedge, divisive culture war issue. It's very easy to have an opinionated take on it. It's extremely emotional and raw and sensitive. And it serves the interests of the status quo, because if you were having debate about wages, about unions, about democracy in the workplace, something you talk about, well, those are issues that are like 80-20 and they don't benefit the status quo. So we have to push those off the table. It's much easier for the powers that be to focus on things that are split 50-50 like that, like abortion, which mask deeper level problems.
Right. Because labor, when she talks about that being like 80-20, I mean, let's think about it. What did Chris Smalls do? He organized the workers at the Amazon facility in Staten Island. Staten Island is a conservative town. I'm just going to keep it real with you. I used to live in New York City. I know what Staten Island was like. It's a conservative town. But when you're organizing workers, you can't just say, I'm going to organize people who are Democrat. I'm going to organize people who are conservative. You're going to try to organize as many people all together as you can to build a union and make your union strong. So that's what Chris Smalls did. He's not the only one that's done that, but that's how organizing works when you're trying to organize and start some type of a union, right? So that being said, take that same message and apply it to us in reference to a lot of these issues that we've been fighting for. When I talk about Medicare for all, I mean for all. I don't mean just for people on the left. I don't mean just for people who are part of the Democratic Party. I don't mean just Bernie supporters. It's supposed to be for all. So when people organize marches, and they have people in these marches that are organizing with them and their speakers, and they may not be on the left, some of them may be conservative, you shouldn't have an issue with that. None of you should have an issue with it. Yeah, people did last year, but none of you should have an issue with it because it's supposed to be for all. It's a class issue. And I will keep saying that until it resonates with more people. These are class issues. What has happened is that we have allowed the Democratic Party to co-opt the progressive message and the progressive strategy. Now you have the Democratic Party on Twitter telling everyone that they are a grassroots organization. I think we all know that's a lie. Where did they get that from? They got that from Bernie Sanders' movement. They got that from Justice Democrats. This was the mistake of doing that strategy of putting progressive through the Democratic Party, because now the Democratic Party has co-opted the term progressive. They've co-opted the term grassroots. And now there's nothing left. This is why they would be so much stronger if they were to leave and go on their own and start their own organization. Just wanted to point that out. These are class issues.
I want to go back to your comment about the left-wing consciousness. If I understood you correctly, you believe it is growing. Why is that? Tell us a little bit how you see that growing critique, if you like, of the traditional Democratic Party and the attempt to somehow carve out a left wing or a new left here in the United States.
I think it starts with the financial crash, the housing collapse. You have the Occupy Wall Street movement. That's the spark out of that, where for the first time, you have this really visible critique of capitalism. And I think the language of Occupy got a lot of things right. The 99 versus the 1% was probably some of the best sort of framing of class consciousness that we've had, at least in my lifetime.
And I want to remind everyone in reference to the Occupy movement, because I think it's important to have this reminder every now and then, that was not done through electoral politics. That was a movement with organizers and activists. I know Bernie Sanders came along with his campaign for 2016, and he some people say he took their message. I don't know if I want to go that far, but he kind of used some of those same words for his movement, right? It's about the 99%. It's about all of us against the top 1%, right? But I want to remind you that Occupy was not done. Eric, I deleted them. The other one should stay. I want to remind you that Occupy was not done through a campaign. That's important to note, right?
The US. Directly out of Occupy, you end up with the Bernie Sanders political movement. I mean, right out of that, some of the same organizers, they organize people for Bernie. They sort of, recruit him into the race. And
this was the problem. And it's something I didn't see back then. Look, I was excited about Bernie too. It was something I did not see back then. But this was the problem. The Occupy movement, and I know Obama cracked down on them. And of course, Obama, the dream killer of any type of progress that we try to have in this country. Of course, he would come in. But one thing I do want to mention, looking back on things, I don't think that should have happened. I don't think that some of the Occupy people should have went into Bernie's campaign. I don't think Bernie Sanders should have taken that message and ran it through a campaign. I think that should have remained an activist thing. I think that should have remained direct action. And I think we should have continued it in some way, shape, or form. Like, yes, Obama came in, but maybe we could have started it up again later on, if that makes sense. Because here's the thing. That message went into Bernie Sanders' campaign. Bernie Sanders loses the first time he runs. The message is still kind of in the air because Trump was so horrible. And people were like, damn it, we should have got Bernie. Bernie Sanders runs again. So 2 election cycles in a row. That message becomes even more powerful now, the second time around, because he reached more people and got more mainstream press, right? But here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. When Bernie Sanders lost the second time around, he left his movement. So the message that came from the Occupy movement that was tossed into Bernie Sanders' 2 campaigns, the moment he suspended his second campaign, the energy of the movement died. And this is why I say it should have remained an outside movement. It should have never been connected to a campaign. And that's hard for me to say looking back on, because I was a big Bernie supporter. I donated a lot of money to Bernie Sanders. I went to Bernie Sanders rallies. So that's hard for me to admit. But looking back on it, we should have never put that movement into a campaign. Just my thoughts on that.
Creates a permission structure for young Americans in particular to think bigger and imagine something different than the bounds of the neoliberal Democratic Party debate. And of course, this comes on the heels of the disappointments of Barack Obama and the hollow nature of the change and the hope that he ultimately promised. So you have that. And now you have something different too, which is that for the first time, again, in my lifetime, you have an energetic labor movement. You have this grassroots movement of workers saying, you know what, and this is what Chris Small said at Amazon Labor Union, we're not going to quit our jobs anymore. We're going to organize and make these jobs that.
Yeah, so I do want to add something here too. As someone who is also a millennial, I do want to add, I have to add this in as well. I think that Obama and George W. Bush, they really screwed up a lot for millennials, for my generation. They really did. And with Obama, I can easily point to him choosing to bail out Wall Street over the American people. He tanked Black wealth. He really ruined it for like my generation. So after Obama, for me, there was no other option. Like me, like looking back on things and remembering how I was financially, I was really struggling back then. There was no other option. After Obama, I was done. That's when I started to become more and more, I don't know if I want to say radical, but I started to move further and further left because I saw here we had a Black president, which they told us to put in, that they praised so much. Identity politics, I fell for that with Barack Obama. So here we had that, and he still didn't do anything, not to help the people. When he was given the option to choose between Wall Street and helping homeowners who had their homes stolen from them, Barack Obama chose to bail out Wall Street because that's who politicians in DC answer to. At the time, I couldn't understand that because I didn't really understand how money and politics worked. As I got older, obviously that changed. But I'm going to say it again. Barack Obama and George W. Bush, because the war in Iraq, you guys, both of you really screwed it up for millennials in this country. You really did. I'm going to go back into the video.
Have into good jobs. So I think all of those things, the awareness of coming out of the financial crash, the anger coming out of the financial crash, the fact that the millennial generation is the first generation that's going to do worse than their parents, that's meeting every milestone later than their parents, the actualization of that through the Bernie Sanders movement and giving people sort of a space and a way to come together and a common framing and a common agenda. I think that has led to, a massively increased left awareness and class awareness. Now, currently, there's a lot.
So here's the thing. I think this is where we differ. I notice she separates left and class. She mentions left awareness and class awareness. And this is something I used to do too. Until one day I started to realize after talking to people who are conservative that agreed with me that everybody should have health care in this country. That was the big one, by the way. In reference to Bernie Sanders' policies, when it came to health care, when I talked to people who were on the right, that seemed to be the big one that they agreed with. Didn't necessarily agree with me on all the other ones. But I think we need to stop doing this. I want to stop separating left and class, because class, that's universal. Class is not separated by party. So I think this is something, again, that happened once Occupy's message went through Bernie Sanders' campaigns. All of a sudden, that we are the 99%, which was through direct action. All of a sudden, it was we are the 99% on the left. It was through a campaign. So people associated those policies and those ideas with a left movement when it was originally just attached to a people-powered movement. This is how we end up making these mistakes. This is how we end up saying the left and class. No, there's no separation there. Class is universal. Just something I want to mention.
A lot of splintering, and there's a lot of fracturing, and there's a lot of demobilization. I saw someone online say Joe Biden was basically elected to kill our political imagination and make us believe we can't do any more than what we're doing. And I think that's all true. But, that broader awakening isn't something that you can just put back in the bottle and stuff under the bed.
Do you think we've gone beyond the taboo? I'm older than you. I lived my life here in the United States through the whole Cold War, everything. The taboo that you can't speak critically of capitalism, you can't say capitalism most of the time. If you do, you have to bow down and celebrate it. You can't attack it. You can't talk about its weaknesses. Are we out of that box? Have we grown up enough to be able to talk about it? Or are we still stuck in that frozen period?
I think it is very generational, isn't it? So I think young Americans are very comfortable talking about critiquing capitalism. I'm 40 years old. I'm basically like the oldest millennial that you can be. And I basically feel like people my age and younger.
So this is something that we've mentioned a lot over at RBN as well. A lot of times I've noticed that when I talk about certain issues, when I criticize capitalism, there's a generational divide. Even when I talk about defund the police, and those of you who've been with me like back then when Garland Nixon came on, he talked about defund the police, and then he came back on and him and Nick kind of had a discussion about defunding the police. And we talked about the fact that there seems to be a generational divide. And I can see it. You're right. So like people like me, people were Gen Z, my students were Gen Z. They were more willing to embrace socialism. I was more willing to embrace socialism once I deprogrammed my mind, because for years I had been taught that socialism was like this evil boogeyman or something like that. But I noticed when I talked to my parents' generation, they seem to be hesitant to do so. They seem to think that, especially grandparents, they tend to think about socialism as a negative thing because historically, the things that have happened in this country, right? So for me, I think it's easier for me to adapt to change. Roger Meadows sent me something recently, and it was something I did not think about. Roger Meadows said, in reference to my generation, he felt like we are more likely to adapt to change, or we do it more so easily. And I think the reason that is because we kind of didn't have a choice. We had to. Those of you that were me and you're millennials, again, anybody who went through that 2008, went through that housing crisis, those of us, I think we were probably the first generation, and Gen Xers don't get mad at me. I think we were probably the first generation that was heavily, heavily pushed to go to college, that was heavily told that we had to in order to have a decent living. So a lot of us did that and then ended up with enormous student loan debt, even though they told us it would pay off in the end because we would be able to make an income that would pay that off. And that did not happen. So I think that that's part of it. That's a big part of it. So I do agree with her here. There does seem to be a generational divide, but we live through different times, right? Our wages didn't adjust for inflation. So what my parents were making at my age is different than what I'm making because our wages never adjusted for inflation. And I think that's important for people to know.
We didn't grow up with that same Cold War sensibility. So that wasn't as much a part of our cultural upbringing. And we've also, my age cohort, we were coming of age during the housing crash. All the promises of, you just work hard and you go to college, and you rack up all this debt, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be worth it on the other side. We see the way that was a lie, and that our futures were basically sold out by, politicians before us. So I think among people my age and younger, there's a lot of comfort with it. Older generations, it's funny because they'll walk right up to the edge. They'll talk about, corporate greed and the corruption. And those are all things that are safe to say. But to go that extra step further and say, the problem is capitalism, then it's, this is scary. Yeah. This is social. What are you talking about? Yeah. So I think the sentiment and the awareness that something is deeply broken and rotten and hollow at the core of our society is there. But among older generations, I think there's still a lot of discomfort of naming the problem as capitalism itself.
Right.
And also, too, they're more likely to say, and this is not to, again, harp on you guys who are older generation, but usually when you hear people say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, who does that come from? That doesn't come from my generation for the most part, right? So there's that element to it, too. But I did want you guys to hear that conversation because I thought that was interesting. And it kind of reminds me of something I've been saying before, is like there seems to be like this separation of class and different political parties, when at the end of the day, no, there's no separation. You can be poor and be a Republican. You can be poor and be a Democrat. You can be poor and not have a political party that you're attached to at all. But there is no separation. But I think where that came in was, again, that movement was attached to a campaign that ran through the Democratic Party, even though Bernie Sanders is an independent. That's why you can't mix the two. That's why if you organize on the outside, keep it that way. Don't let Democrats get a hold of your direct action, because then it's seen as like, oh, this is a Democrat thing. So that's a big part of it. Salty Granny. I remember my grandfather saying that, and I'm old. Oh, your grandfather said that too? Yeah. Yeah. Peter said boomers grew up in a world where they had some of the things we want or close to them, yet they act like we are talking crazy talk. That's a good point. Thank you so much for the super chat, Kashranada. What are left-right issues anyway? Dems have become such a big tent party. They have supported anti-abortion candidates. That's true. Left/right doesn't exist. It's right versus poor at all times. Interesting. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for the super chat. Yep. X at Sabby was a recent report from Mint Press News that shows Twitter is hiring more feds to censor and ban people who criticize NATO and the U.S. empire. We need Panquake. Yes, I heard about that. I told you guys, some of those accounts on Twitter, I told you, some of the trolls, like the people who do nothing but troll. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Citizen United asserts the spending of money is free speech. Barring my rejection of that notion, continues. Thank you for the super chat as well. I argue that money is an unequal variable. All of us do not have that same amount. It represents an economic class problem. The rich controls democracy. Well said. Thank you so much for that. I have one more story for you guys tonight. Oh, I'm going over 9 o'clock again. Yikes. I'm sorry, guys. I have one more story for you tonight, but this one's a quick one. Amazon CEO, he was asked about how he feels about Chris Smalls organizing, starting unions in this country. And I don't think you're going to like what he said. First of all, I caught him saying some things that are not quite true. So let's go ahead and get into that. Quick shout out here to Case Study QB for this clip. As always, again, this is Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, and he has a message about people like Chris Smalls that want to organize the workers.
First vote to unionize at an Amazon warehouse. I know you've been spending a lot of time at warehouses. When you look at someone like Chris Smalls, who I think some people look at as this modern day hero who got fired, pulled off this union vote, what's your message to someone like him? Your message to the folks who think maybe we should join a union?
Well, I think that the first thing to be clear about is that employees get to make that choice, whether they want to have a union or not. They always have had that choice, and it continues to be their choice. And
he's lying. Two things I want to point out. Look at his background. What does it say behind him right here? What does that say? Bloomberg, right? Okay. This is Bloomberg Studio 1.0. That's who's controlling this media space that he's in right now. So just keep that in mind when you hear the talking points. Number two, when he mentions that, well, the employees have always had that choice. If they always had that choice, then why was Amazon firing employees that were trying to unionize? Chris Smalls talked about this. He mentioned one of his own coworkers was fired from Amazon for trying to unionize. And it got to the point where he was living in a shelter, a homeless shelter, because he lost his job, because they let him go. But according to Andy Jassy here, he said, well, employees have always had that choice. See how they just lie? Like, there's more. I'll let him go on.
We happen to think they're better off without a union for a number of reasons, including the fact that, it's much harder when you have a union to have a direct relationship with your manager and to get things.
It's much harder to have a direct relationship with your manager when you have a union. Okay. I think that's one of the points of being a part of a union, because obviously there are some things you may not feel comfortable discussing with your manager because they're your supervisor. So if you come to them about, hey, I think I should get this, and they push back and they say, no, what are you going to do? Because they're your supervisor. They have power over you. You have no power over them. So he said that as if that was a gotcha moment, but it's really not, as if it was a positive thing, but it's not. So that was really laughable. Here we go.
It's much harder when you have a union to have a direct relationship with your manager and to get things done quickly. So if you see something on the line that you think could be better for your team or you or your customers, you can't just go to your manager and say, let's change this. There's a whole process in
You can't just go to your manager and say, hey, let's change this. I'm sorry, but a lot of us can't go to our managers and say that now. Are you kidding me? Anytime I went to my manager and I would say, hey, can we do this? How about we switch this up and do that? You know what they would say? Let me talk to the dean. And then the dean would have to talk to the president of the university. And that's why things take so long to get done in higher ed or education, period, because there's a lot of bureaucracy. You have to go through all these different channels just to get one little thing done. So he says this as though it's just easy. You just go to your supervisor and say, I want this changed. Let's get this done. And it just happens. It doesn't just happen. If that was the case, Amazon employees wouldn't have felt the need to unionize in the first place.
Bureaucracy that you have to go through to be able to do that. And we get, when there's a union, we're going to get the feedback filtered by what the union decides is worth bringing up. And we'd much rather hear from every employee whatever is on their mind. And so, I think if you want to continue.
They much rather hear from every employee what's on their mind, except for the ones who want to unionize, though. They didn't want to hear from them. That's why they fired some of them.
To have the structure that we've had for all this time, you have to have really competitive benefits. And then I think if you look at Amazon's, they're very unusual in this space. We championed the $15 minimum wage several years ago. The starting salary is now over $18 an hour, which is more than double the federal minimum wage. You get full health insurance and 401k and up to 20 weeks of parental leave. And if you want to get a college education, you haven't had one, we have a career choice program that lets our fulfillment center associates be able to do so. That is a very unusual and compelling set of benefits, and those were all accomplished without a union. So
there he goes, lying again. First of all, let's talk about the pay. Let me go back just a little bit.
we get, when there's a union, we're going to get the feedback filtered by what the union decides is worth bringing up. And we'd much rather hear from every employee whatever is on their mind. And so, I think if you want to continue to have the structure that we've had for all this time, you have to have really competitive benefits. And then I think if you look at Amazon's, they're very unusual in this space. We champion the $15 minimum wage.
We champion the $15 minimum wage. But why did Amazon do that? Amazon did that because there were activists that organized. Bernie Sanders was actually a part of this as well, that organized and pushed Amazon to pay the employees $15 an hour. He leaves that part out, though. The way he's talking about it, it sounds like Amazon just did that right out of the gate. I'm just saying.
Several years ago, the starting salary is now over $18 an hour, which is more than double the federal minimum wage. You get full health insurance and 401k and up to 20 weeks of parental leave. And
he brags about that. And I will say, when they say, oh, you get full health insurance and parental leave, everyone should get that. You see, this shouldn't be something that is left up to corporations to decide. Everyone should get that regardless in the wealthiest country in the world. Not bragging points, bro. He knocks me out, though, with the up to 20 weeks of paid leave. What is up to?
If you want to get a college education, you haven't had one, we have a career choice program that lets our fulfillment center associates be able to do so. That is a very unusual and compelling set of benefits, and those were all accomplished without a union. So,
all accomplished without a union, but he doesn't mention to you that some of those things were accomplished because there were activists that complained and pushed and organized and demanded it. They demanded that Amazon give them $15 an hour.
I think that we realize that we have to continue to work on the relationship with our employees, and we need to continue to provide the right benefits, and we need to continue to work on safety, and that's our intention.
Let's look at something here. Let's have some fun. I was curious. I wanted to see Amazon employee benefits. Let's check out something here. Amazon employee benefits. By the way, this is on their website. You can check this out yourself. So here's the $18 an hour, which he mentioned. That's true. That's right there. But I want to show you something. There was something that was weird to me. All right, financial success. Our average starting hourly wage is $18 per hour, more than double the federal minimum wage. For full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees and contractors. In addition to fair pay, employees have opportunities to own Amazon stock, participate in 401k plans. By the way, everybody should have 401k. That shouldn't be something that only certain companies can offer you. I think that's bullshit, by the way. That's the reason why a lot of people have no retirement fund. With company match and enroll in paid life and accident insurance. Financial counseling and estate planning services are also available, plus paid short-term and long-term disability if needed. This part right here always, as someone who worked in healthcare, this bothers me, this if needed part, because what can tend to happen when they say paid short-term and long-term disability if needed, they actually decide if it's needed. And I've seen this happen before with employees that really did need to have some type of short-term disability, but the employer, I'm not going to say their name, but the employer that I worked for at that point in time didn't feel that their situation was dire enough to give them short-term disability. So they could either stay out of work and use up their PTO to get paid for that or not get paid. You got to be careful with the short-term and the long-term disability if needed when it comes to corporations. I'm just telling you from experience. The other part here that I wanted to point out, employee health. Taking care of employees' health and wellness is a priority. That's why we are, that's funny because you didn't do that during the pandemic. That's why we offer medical, dental, and vision coverage to all regular full-time employees. This is the problem. If taking care of your employees' health and wellness is a priority, why are you only offering it to full-time employees? So Mr. CEO there, Mr. Andy, when he said we author health insurance, he didn't tell you that the health insurance is only for regular full-time employees. So that also includes people who are part-time and people who are contractors. You got to make sure you mention them too. They don't get this. There's more. Let's go down here. This part's kind of funny. When employees want to take time away from work, they are they're afforded ample paid time and paid holidays, in addition to other leave and medical accommodations that are available for mental and physical health concerns. It's just the way they say it. When employees want to take time away from work, they are afforded ample paid time and paid holidays. How many? How many? There's no numbers. How many paid holidays do you get? How much paid time off do you get? They don't give you a number. What's ample? Let's go on. There was another one here I wanted to show you. I hate that ample stuff. Is that the one caring for families? That wasn't the one. Oh, this one. This is funny. Parental leave. Amazon supports employees throughout all stages of their lives. We celebrate the growth of our employees' families through a variety of benefits. We offer, this is the part that bothers me. We offer up to 20 weeks of paid leave to birthing mothers and 6 weeks for parents who adopt. What the heck is up to 20 weeks? What do you mean up to? How do you decide if one employee is going to get 14 weeks and another gets up to the 20? I don't like this up to. I don't like it. No. No up to, no ample. Sabby not like. YepX said wording. I don't like that. Just give us a number. So I think this is important for people to see, though. It's not necessarily as he claimed. He also didn't tell you the full story about the college tuition. Yes, they do offer pay full college tuition, but according to their website, Amazon pays full college tuition for frontline employees. So he didn't mention that in the interview. So if you're not a frontline employee, according to this website, you don't qualify for that. This is why it's important to look up what they say after these interviews, because I'm just like, wait a minute, is that necessarily the case? Because I know I've had friends that have worked for Amazon before and they weren't getting these opportunities that he was talking about. So it's important to, what's that, Ware Pilgrim? Doesn't that disqualify those in the warehouse? That's what I'm wondering, because it says frontline. I don't know. Anyone in the chat worked at Amazon before? Anyone? What's that, Delthea? My kid did time. I love it. My kid did time. My kid did time at Amazon. My kid did time at Amazon warehouse to get Christmas money. He did that once and that was enough. Amazon is full of BS. Yeah. They don't have college reimbursement. I think he meant at Amazon. I worked at Amazon. So even maybe their website isn't honest. I don't know. Yeah, I know. I love it. Right, Miguel? Did time at Amazon. Oh my gosh. I thought I got those. Oh, thank you for the super chat, AJF. I argue that money is an unequal variable. All of us do not have the same amount. It represents an economic class problem. The rich controls democracy. Delthea said anything Amazon has done comes out of fear of a coming union. Right. Like even when he mentioned the $15 minimum wage, he didn't even mention that, like, look, dude, you were pushed to do that. Guys, don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to do that. That helps me with the algorithm. And I do want to remind you guys, I'm not here tomorrow night. I know you're used to seeing me Wednesday, but remember I switched days. So I'll be back on Thursday, taking tonight off. I'll send out a newsletter reminder too, just to remind people that Sabby is on Thursday, not Wednesday. So if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, please do that. It's pinned at the top of the chat. That's a better way to get alerts for my live streams. Just keeping it real. That, you'll always get. I can't speak for YouTube sending you those alerts because I don't get notifications sometimes for people's videos. Rockfin comments. Thirsty Thursday. Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Oops, my bad. I thought fake Andre Harrell lookalike was your congressperson. So sorry, Sabby. How was your convo with Angela? Oh, yeah. I was going to message you. Can you send me the number? I'm sorry, I can't find the email. I don't know if it was an email or DM. I can't find it. Just DM it to me or something. I forget. I'm terrible. I told you. Thank you for this tip as well, Roger. The right talks of authoritarian left censoring, but Wolff, as he has told us through life experience, no one is better at censorship than the right during the McCarthy era, where people with his views were locked out of media. He said, it is only due to Bernie where his name is getting out there. Wolff said when he was in college, it was a no-no to speak about capitalism flaws and don't speak socialism or communism. Wow. Thank you for this tip, Snorky. Yes, Biden poll numbers appear to be ordered to be high so that people paying can get Biden administration to call on reporters. Ouch. And thank you for this tip as well, Roger. If 18 states passed a state constitutional amendment to abolish parties at every level of government, this can completely break a fixed Congress in half. I would completely change the coverage on how the news covers politics, especially in DC, because those 36 rogue senators would be free to pursue policy on an issue by issue basis, not being anchored down by a party. It would make it harder for Democrats and Republicans to control the Senate without them. And thanks for this one as well. Half of my Gen X went with baby boomers and half went with you guys. The young is always more flexible in thinking, body and soul. Eventually, with age comes calcification. I can't see it the whole way, but Sabby, you think you're radical now. I guarantee the gens coming after you might see you as a neoliberal who is out of touch. It is the way of life. Dread the day of the unborn. And maybe Gen Z see you as Bill Maher. They do not see me as Bill Maher. It is coming. During the Bush administration, I want you to remember this is the same conversation we have with Walmart now. They fell to the back and now Amazon is receiving heat while they stay out of the spotlight. During Obama, the banks were in the spotlight while today big tech is receiving heat while they play the back. This proves the game never changes, only the players in the game. You must change the game. Don't want to be a player no more. We have to change the game. All right, guys, it is way past my time. I have to get going. Remember, I'm not here tomorrow night. I switched to Thursdays. No more Wednesday for Sabby. So catch me on Thursday, 8 p.m. Sign up for my newsletter. You'll get the alerts and we can all roll out. Other than that, have a good night. Keep up the fight.